Now, for all of Obama's talk on the campaign trail about the importance of protecting whistleblowers, his administration has been the worst and has the worst track record in silencing and prosecuting those he once called to protect. One of the most startling cases of government whistleblowing is Sibel Edmonds, who's been called the most gagged woman in history. Sibel is an Iranian-born former FBI translator who's been fighting for years to tell her story. Until now. After waiting 340 days for FBI clearance of her memoir, she decided to release the book on her own, in full, without any approval or redactions. The book gives explosive allegations that indict multiple levels of the government in traitorous deception and cover-up inside the FBI. Sibel Edmonds is the founder and director of the National Security Whistleblower Coalition and the author of the book Classified Woman. She joins me in the studio for more. Sibel, there's been a gag order against you for years, and you're deciding to come out now. Why?
Well, it took several years, to be exact 5 years, to fight this case, or try to fight this case in courts and through Congress and through executive agencies such as the Inspector General's office. And basically, in every turn, I was further classified. In fact, the government, and this is during the Bush administration, Attorney General at the time, John Ashcroft, ended up invoking another gag order on Congress. They retroactively classified everything Congress had investigated in my case. So after those 6 years, I was exhausted. So I went away for 2 years, came back in 2009 thinking that we are going to have a new administration and that we were going to see at least hopefully some kind of a change. And that didn't take place, but I started writing this book and I abided by the Justice Department's own regulations, the law. I submitted it to them. They had 30 days to redact it and give it back to me. They didn't. And they kept sending letters for a year to my attorneys saying that I cannot publish a single word in this book, but they would not give us a redacted version. We fulfilled our obligation. I have Constitution on my side, so I went ahead and I finally published this book, so it's out.
In your book, you talk about high government officials actually working against the interests of national security. And you talk about very clear warnings about 9/11 that were either ignored or censored from different elements of the agency. Could you talk about why elements of the government work against their national security and not prevent attacks such as that?
Well, in 9/11 cases, there were cases where information was intentionally blocked. And in some cases, it was a matter of incompetence, but in many cases, it was intentional. And after 9/11, this information, they were classified further. They were not provided to the 9/11 Commission. They were not, these information, they didn't make their ways into the Senate and the House joint inquiry into 9/11. So if you look at all these reports from these various bodies, you don't see any of this evidence that FBI had in its possession for years. So that had to do with 9/11, but with corruption cases, it mainly involved foreign lobby and foreign organizations working with high-level U.S. officials, some of them elected in Congress. We still have some of those. Just through my section division, we had 12, 13 congressional people. We also had people within the State Department, and we are looking at people who were as high as second, third highest people in State Department who were working with certain foreign entities and organizations, and they were providing information to these organizations.
What about the alternative media who, I mean, many alternative media have persecuted you for providing an alternative theory that doesn't quite gel with the government's narrative about these events and about what you're saying. Do you think the media is complicit in this cover-up?
Well, you have to look at two kinds of medias today. One is the mainstream media, and I believe as far as they are concerned, everybody knows. I don't think they have any credibility left, neither with the American public. So nobody even takes them seriously. I mean, you're looking at New York Times that sold all these lies with Iraq war. I mean, they had Judith Miller. So, for example, if they were to review my book and they would say something positive, I would really panic because considering where they stand, that would be a very, very big insult for me. And as far as the alternative mediums, well, we have places like RT here that has been very consistent in being independent. But many alternatives, they are receiving their funding, their money from these foundations that are owned by those corporations, large mega corporations, the same 1% we've been screaming about. So how could they be independent? I mean, when you have Soros foundations, several Soros, giving millions of dollars to a particular alternative media, what is alternative about that? So I refer to them as quasi-alternatives. And unfortunately, today we have very few media channels, whether it is print or radio, that is truly alternative and truly independent.
Let's talk about what would you say is the most explosive allegation that your book puts forward, specifically?
For this book, as I said, I submitted it to the FBI, and I did not disclose anything that I perceived and knew to be classified. Now, for people who read this book, they know that we have been, for example, cooperating as a country with whom we call terrorists, whether it's bin Laden or bin Laden-related groups. We've been working with them since mid-1990s, okay? And we've been working with them in Central Asia, and this continued even after September 11, 2001. We have been directly, as a country, as a nation, and the Congress budgets this, these are the secret budgets, we've been funding terrorist groups like Chechens. Any kind of activities that have been carried out, the major ones between 1996 and 2001, let's say by major Chechen terrorists, were directly under our order, our funding, our arming, and our direction. And we worked very closely with individuals and the groups from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and most importantly, NATO ally Turkey, to put in place various cells in Central Asia and Caucasus to create terror.
So what about these domestic cases that we're seeing, all these continued foiled terror plots that somehow it all comes out that there's cases of entrapment? I mean, do you think that these are legitimate, or do you think that this is just to justify police state measures at home and endless war abroad?
It is so hard to tell, as I have said several times, because the media and the government has no credibility. It's hard to judge which one is real, which one is not. But one thing is real, and that is the government needs to keep this fear factor alive. And in order to do that, they have to have these incidents. Otherwise, 9/11 is going to get old, and people are going to say, wait a second. The biggest attacks to our nation, to our Constitution, did not come from some terrorists. It has been coming continually from our own government, because Al-Qaeda can't attack our freedom. They can't attack, if they exist now today, they can't attack our Constitution. The only attack on American people and our Constitution, our liberties, our even a national dignity, whether in terms of in the eyes of the international community or here. When you go to the airport and if you're fondled, this is the nation, this is the government that considers every single citizen a suspect. And they don't have warrant, yet they search you. Well, these attacks are coming and they are being inflicted upon Americans by the United States government, no outsider, whether it's in the south of the border or if it's some kind of imaginary Al-Qaeda in Yemen.
Well, let's talk about Al-Qaeda a little bit, and also this recent bin Laden killing. You know, Al-Qaeda is a tactic, and until 9/11, no one really referred to it as an organization. I mean, do you look at the entire war on terror and just say, you know, this is completely fabricated, and what do you think about the bin Laden killing? I mean, there's all these reports of him dying 10 years ago, and really we've been presented no evidence put forward.
I think confusion is one of the main objectives that this psyop on people we see here, and that is they create so many of these layers and confusions. Nobody knows what is real, what is, and even the logic doesn't work. And as you said, you brought up a very important point. Within the FBI, we work with files dating back to mid-1990s. There was no unit in the FBI that dealt with Al-Qaeda. Anybody who claims that, those people are liars, because they had units called Mujahideen. Well, Mujahideen, while FBI were conducting some investigations, two other branches of our executive branch, and that is the State Department and the CIA, starting from 1995, were closely working with these people. In fact, they were using NATO planes to bring these entities from Afghanistan, from Saudi Arabia, from various places in Central Asia into Turkey, and Turkey is a NATO country. They were given Turkish passports, and they were being sent to Bosnia. So how could they have units chasing Al-Qaeda when Al-Qaeda was our biggest partner, and it was not called Al-Qaeda? They refer to them as our allies, Mujahideens.
It is very interesting, and like you said, working with bin Laden and very closely with these organizations before and after 9/11. That was Sibel Edmonds, founder and director of the National Security Whistleblower Coalition, and the author of the book Classified Woman.